Second breakfast? What is that? Something smells good. What's cooking, Maggie? What is that?
Well, I'll tell you. But first, I got to back up and explain. So, Cam, I miss school sometimes. No, I promise this is relevant. I miss school sometimes, right? I miss the structure. Mm-hmm. I miss, like there was responsibility, but only to an extent.
The thrill of homework.
The thrill of just doing an assigned task and turning it in and getting a grade immediately. Like that, I miss that.
We're both losers.
I also, I miss the learning. I miss, all that, right?
You miss worksheets, and so do I.
Right, but listen, what I don't miss about school is how much time it ate of my life, right? Because I did something this weekend that I could never have done when I was in school. Mm-hmm. Not high school, not college, not grad school, none of that. I made croissants this weekend.
Yes, you did.
I like to bake, but I'm an amateur, right? Like most of my baking experience is like cookies and brownies and cupcakes.
You're a pandemic baker.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
It's banana bread. Like it's the simple things mm-hmm. because I don't like to... I'm all about the final product and less about the process. Mm-hmm. So I like something that's quick, easy. I love a good mix, But also, I like a challenge and I like learning new things. And I was like, you know what? I need to just try something new out of my comfort zone. I've done that with sewing, podcasting, video games, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I'm going to try just the hardest thing you can imagine in baking, which is croissants. And I made homemade croissants this weekend. And I was so excited. It took me 2 days.
It did.
And let me tell you, they did not turn out great.
I disagree.
They're maybe the worst croissants I've ever had.
I think they're lovely.
But I'm telling you, just the joy of spending a full Saturday, making dough, chilling it in the fridge, hanging out for an hour, making a butter block, putting the up and down, back and forth, because again, it takes all day because it's this, if you don't know, making croissants is a multi-step process, and it's a lot of chilling and timing things and folding things and waiting around.
All the layers and the flakiness.
I couldn't leave the house, right? Yeah. So I was just at home, in between dough making and butter flattening, I was playing a game or reading a book or whatever, mm-hmm. but I could not have done that as a student, and I am just...
I could not have...
Sorry, did you? I hope y'all didn't hear that.
Oh, I did.
I thought it was seamless. Anyway, it was a lot of fun, okay? And I felt like a little hobbit making my little croissants, just having a good time. Man, I'm sorry. Cam just realized his fly is open. He's going to fix that. This is so great that this is not a visual podcast. Anyway, sure. I'm just so excited to have done this project. If you have any tips on how to get your détrempe to rise, please help. Because mm-hmm. it wouldn't rise. So the croissants are great, except that they're incredibly dense because they didn't rise.
They taste great and they look wonderful. We should put a picture up.
I'll put up a pic. They do look
We'll
really
put
good.
it in the Substack.
Yeah,
Second Breakfast Pod, but where you can get bonus episodes every month and behind the scenes features.
That's right. So if you are a baker, give me some tips on how to make good croissants. I followed the New York Times recipe with Claire, what's her name? I watched the video 85 times and I used the recipe and I used all the good ingredients, but I just couldn't get it to rise. So maybe it's something with the salt. I don't know. Help me. But that's my opening. I'm just thrilled that I got to make croissants this weekend.
You did a great job. I really liked them.
Thank
I
you.
had one for breakfast this morning.
I did too. It was a nice time.
We're not here to talk about something good, like croissants.
No.
So, okay. So this is... I grew up with this, right? I grew up with Star Wars.
Yep.
And I remember loving the original trilogy. And then, of course, I was a kid when the prequel trilogy came out.
Right.
And I saw all of those in theaters and got all excited, and I thought they were great at the time. Mm-hmm. And then the Disney bought Star Wars, and Rogue One was great, Mandalorian's great, Solo's great. That main trilogy they made, the first one's okay, the second one's okay, the third one's not okay. It just kind of faded off.
Right.
But rewatching them for the pod, because we've done the first two now, Star Wars New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. Those are fantastic movies. Mm-hmm. All-timers.
Sure.
I know they're part of the sort of canon, but they are impeccable movies.
Sure.
I thought the franchise only started to kind of get bad when it was brought back decades later for additional trilogies.
Little did we know.
There were two good movies.
You know what my reward was for making these for spending 2 days making croissants was watching this movie.
It's I mean, we'll get into the details because I think we've got some good analogies to sort of flesh this out. But it's weird that there was one great movie and one fantastic sequel.
Yes. And then there was this.
It's been 40 years of chasing Empire.
Yeah.
Because you can't make the first one again.
No.
Right? You'll never have
Right.
that majesty and wonder of introducing that world.
They tried to do it in episode 7.
Sure, but it was pale.
Yeah.
It was a pale imitation. And
Yeah.
so if everything after the first movie is an attempt to make a good Star Wars sequel, even if it's an original story, it's a sequel in that it's adding to this world.
Right.
There's been one good Star Wars sequel,
Yeah.
Empire. And that
Yeah.
means there have been like 8 mediocre ones.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that started with Return of the Jedi.
I know. I was so disappointed because I loved Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, yeah.
I really did. I mean, we talked all about it. Go listen to that episode. But like it set up so many great things, and then this just didn't do anything with all the exciting like plot devices and themes and ideas that it set
Right.
up. It just kind of went.
I've got some longer points and theories and examples to jump into, but I was
Okay.
trying to find like sort of a headline for
Yeah.
my thoughts on this movie.
Well, and I should also say we're not just gonna like sit here and roast this movie. Like that's
It's
not
productive.
That's not helpful.
We're
right?
trying to figure out where it went wrong and how different it
Yeah.
is from the other ones.
Now, if you get me on the subject of the puppets, I will rant. So maybe.
But also, it's a Disney movie, so I'm not going to feel that bad about talking about its shortcomings.
That
it's
is true.
It's not like I'm trashing a little indie movie that needs to make money right now
no,
in theaters.
George Lucas is doing fine.
No. I think you can trash things that are owned by the company eating the entire entertainment industry
Yes.
and has a chokehold on movie theaters.
You can do that. Yeah.
Anyway, I was looking at my notes for Empire Strikes Back to try to, because I loved that as much as you did. And my notes were glowing at the time. And sidebar, criticism does not have to be positive or negative. Criticism is
Right.
just thinking and talking about art in a critical, curious, insightful way.
Right.
So
yeah.
we can do that regardless
Yeah.
of the tone.
You mean it's not just all good or all bad?
Right, it's not just lying in either direction
Oh.
to prove a point. So the thing we praised Empire Strikes Back for, more than anything, was its dozens of new ideas. We
Right.
kept talking about how restless the movie was,
Right.
in that every new scene felt like you watched the first movie 100 times and developed the most interesting what-if scenarios you could think of. And then the Empire Strikes Back was just a parade of those what-if scenarios that tested and challenged this world and really wrung out all of the cool story possibilities from it. There's none of that here.
Right.
There are almost no what-ifs here, and I have some examples to sort of flesh out this point.
Okay.
Return of the Jedi feels unnecessary.
Yes.
The only real plot development in this movie that's like 2 hours and 15 minutes, which is too long for a Star Wars movie.
Yep.
The only real plot development is Darth Vader dying.
Yeah.
But if you zoom out a little bit, you could have done that at the end of Empire. If you wanted to, you could have done the father thing and then nuked him, and then you didn't need to build a third or fourth Death Star. You could have had the revelation, nuked him, blown up, happy ending. That's it.
Yeah. Or you could have had he dies at the end of the second one, and then Luke is like grappling with that and flirts with the dark side, and
But you
maybe
could have-
becomes a new Darth Vader for a second,
Right.
and then
you could have done 20 minutes at the end of Empire that
Right.
accomplished everything in this movie with none of the fat. Like everything else, every major storyline and almost all of the minor ones in Return of the Jedi is either repetition or stalling.
Yeah.
Small scale examples first. We repeat the first movie's opening with the Vader intro and the droid slapstick.
Yeah. And the Empire's ship flying overhead.
But it's that cheap thing where they start with nostalgia by recreating the thing you liked, and then they try to double down by making it a little darker. Like, you have the intimidating black and white Vader introduction, but then you double down and you also have the Emperor pop out. So you have an even more scary black and white and villain intro.
Yeah.
You have the droid desert banter, and then you double down and
It's
you
not
see...
nearly as good.
Right, but it's that same thing of them just
Yeah.
waddling through Tatooine.
Yeah.
And you double down on that by showing them see droids being sold off and branded and appraised. But that pattern of like the same thing but darker, it's so much more frustrating in the film's major storylines. Here are some of those examples. Luke's storyline in this movie is more training, more uncertainty, more mentors. He goes back to Dagobah. He slows... I mean, the entire movie slows down for an exposition recap from a ghost. Yeah. And then there's another confrontation with Vader and another revelation. Han and Leia are on a far-off planet with romantic uncertainty and a very important rebel mission. The problem is that neither of those stories hit as hard the second time.
Right.
And they feel unnecessary. They feel limp and familiar.
It's just more of the same. Yeah.
Right.
It's like, it just makes, it turns it into like a like poorly done, like procedural episodic TV show. Like, oh, what is Luke gonna do with Darth Vader next? What are Leia and Han gonna do next? Like it,
Let's start with the Han Leia relationship because it was resolved in the last film where there was romantic uncertainty, flirtation, rejection, and then it ended with I love yous and declarations of love, and then they were just kind of settled.
Yeah, I mean they were then separated because Han was frozen in carbonite,
but their relationship was fine. He was just a block of ice. Why are they so unsure around each other here?
I know, it's like they try to create this weird. My favorite thing, the most interesting thing about this is the love triangle, because in the very first movie, there is a genuine love triangle of both of these men are interested in this woman, and she's doing her own thing, but has some sort of flirtation with both of them. And it's like, ooh, who's going to end up with who? But then that's very quickly resolved in the second one because Luke and Leia turns out don't really have chemistry, and she and Han totally do.
And when Han puts on the outfit with the vest and those hot pants, it's over.
That does it for her. Right. And so then they end the second movie acknowledging their love for each other. So then the third movie comes around and they're like, oh, remember the love triangle? Let's add some tension. And you have like Han suspecting Luke and Leia of having a thing when, I mean, number one, they're siblings. But like, the point is like there's the dramatic irony of Han doesn't know that. So it's like, ooh, he's jealous. And I'm like, this could be solved so easily if Leia just said, oh, he's my brother.
But he's the least insecure character in fiction.
Right.
Which is why he's charming.
Right, so all of a sudden they make him super insecure, like, oh, you'll talk to Luke. Like, that's not something Han would ever say. And so they're creating this drama that doesn't exist, and it feels so fabricated.
And not to miss the forest for the trees here, but yes, they do nothing with him once he's part of the story, but at the beginning of the story, Han is still the block of ice. He's still frozen in carbonite. So we almost have to establish the impetus for bringing his character back. Because besides that romantic connection and flirtation and whatever for half the movie, why are they saving him? Because when they bring Han Solo back into the fray for all these dire missions that they have to do to try to, I guess, kill the Emperor, he just becomes another rebel. It's exactly what they do to Lando, who also returns for no reason.
Yeah.
Han, at no point in the movie does he use his smuggling past as some sort of pivotal information dump to save the day.
Right.
There's no special strategy. There's no special skill that he has at all. He's not even able to be the dashing pilot he was in the first movie.
Right.
Han doesn't even fly the Falcon again. He uses none of his signature and unique skills. He even literally rewears the same outfit from the last movie.
Right.
He's just there and stalling. Like there's a huge impetus at the beginning of the movie to rescue Han, but there's no payoff to that risk. Look to Pirates 3, where they have to go rescue Jack Sparrow from Davy Jones' locker. But they do that because he knows stuff and he can help them and they can defeat the big bad once they have him and his expertise, and he ends up saving the day.
Right.
Here, Han just becomes a sidekick once he comes back.
Yeah.
And it's not just that they put aside defeating the Empire to go rescue Han. That risk that they're taking, if they lose, could have single-handedly wiped out all of the rebels' best fighters.
Right, exactly. But then it doesn't really matter.
It's a terrible risk. Yeah. And there's no reward. Except for he's there and charming, which is nice, but that's hollow, especially with Leia, because you're bored watching them retread something that we already saw completely resolved.
Yes.
And then if you jump over to Luke's storyline...
I was going to say, you know who else doesn't fly? Right. Luke.
But he doesn't do anything.
He
already finished his training.
Yeah.
Right? We saw him do the training with Yoda. He got some kind of mentoring before that with Obi-Wan. And then he jumps the gun before he's fully done with training. He jumps into real world experience. He's got that hunger and youth.
Because he wants to save his friends. Right.
So what is learned? After he's got the real world experience and grit of the fighting Vader and getting his hand cut off and learning, the true nature of his parentage, what is learned by him going back, resurrecting Yoda and Obi-Wan
Yeah.
to just drop more back. Like, literally nothing is accomplished from that part of the story except clunky Vader backstory.
Yes, and I read in some of the trivia that the reason they did that was because there was concern that people wouldn't believe that Darth Vader was really Luke's father, because the only proof we had was him saying it, and so they were like, well, we have to make sure Yoda confirms it.
Well, I didn't believe the puppets were real. There wasn't a 40-minute interlude proving that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty lame. I think that's pretty stupid.
It's just stalling. The number of, I mean, for the first two being like genuinely rollicking space adventures, this one grinds to a halt like half a dozen times.
Yeah.
My realization when I was trying to put these notes together is that the only character in this galactic cast who has any real growth in this film is Darth Vader. Who's also sort of their most captivating character. He's great to look at. The voice is great. I'm so intrigued about his past and his violence, and his sword is cool. Why not make this movie, this third movie where, you know, the end of a trilogy, the stakes need to be dire. You need to almost have the heroes lose, and then they can be triumphant. So the last movie, they did a great job at making the threats seem genuine. The villains seem powerful. Why not make this movie way more about Darth Vader? Because you could have delivered all of the same backstory if you wanted to, and possibly even used the Obi-Wan ghost scene with Darth Vader.
That would
you could have made him haunted and conflicted in his own arc instead of Luke learning something like second or third hand.
Yeah.
You could have done like a Hamlet Senior plot line.
Oh, sure.
Or you could have given Vader conflict with the other generals. You could have given him conflict with the Emperor and sowed the seeds there instead of having Obi-Wan and Luke discuss it secondhand. Like, you could have had Vader capture Luke way earlier in the movie, and then the Emperor, because the whole point was you need to bring Luke to the dark side, then have Vader capture Luke way early in the movie, and then have the Emperor tell Vader to train Luke. And you develop those characters in a relationship together. You show conflict. You show common ground. You show, oh, they're getting closer, and then they're pushing each other away. You could flirt with Luke's corruption, which is nothing ever happens there. We say the dark side's powerful, but there's not a single moment of Frodo taking the ring for himself. And right before he does the finger lightning, the Emperor, he looks at Luke and says, like, your conversion to the dark side is almost complete. When Luke has done nothing but be purely, boringly heroic.
Yes. That's the most frustrating thing for me, I think, in this, is that they do nothing with that conflict and that temptation, because they set it up in Empire Strikes Back. Luke has that vision in the cave where he sees Darth Vader. He sees himself with Vader's helmet on, and then they're hinting at, and telling us that there's going to be all this temptation about going to the dark side. And then in this movie, there's so much telling and not showing of, like, the dark side is so great. You can do so much with it, but they show you nothing about, like, what makes it so great.
They don't even say you can do so much with it. They just say the dark side is powerful. But Luke, the only Jedi in the movie, does not seek power.
No.
So there's nothing seductive about the Empire or the dark side at all to Luke at any point.
You know what else? Luke doesn't use the Force, like, at all in this movie.
He barely uses a lightsaber.
He uses it, I think, once when they're rescuing Han. He, like, tricks the guards into doing something, in the style of, these aren't the droids you're looking for, like that kind of thing. Other than that, he doesn't use it. So, like, in the whole opening sequence when they're rescuing Han and they're, like, in the, what's that thing in the pit called?
Sarlacc
pit. Like, they're dropping things and, like, the droids are falling. Lando's about to fall, and I'm like, just use the Force and pull him up. What are you doing? Like,
it's like characters forgetting they can time travel.
Yes. I think we even made the joke, like, but there's no wood. Are you a witch or what? Like, we made that joke.
The Harry Potter thing.
Yeah. Like, he doesn't. So what you could have done is have him using the Force, for good to save his friends. But then, like, when they're, like, I don't know, killing off Jabba's, cronies or whatever, he could have gone too far with the Force and been like, oh, I can do a lot with this. Like, and you could have had that really interesting internal conflict, but there's none
or
of
even
that.
you have him fail to use the Force during that whole Jabba's palace intro, and then if he's immediately captured by Vader and Vader has to do this training with him, you could have Vader say, "Oh, I had some sort of spy drone watching that.
Yeah.
Here's what you could have done
Here's
to
how
save
you can,
your friend.
Yes, here's how you can be better at using the Force."
Right, which would have made it look seductive. Not just you can have more power, but look, you could have saved your friends.
Yes.
And you could do it even better with the dark side powers.
You can't make the temptation just about power when your hero doesn't care about power. And it doesn't make any sense.
Right. And for all of these sort of... I'm trying to think of the right word. For all of these sides of Darth Vader that we never see explored, the extra frustrating thing is there are 3 more movies about this character's origin. But, I mean, it's not really a spoiler. Those movies end with him becoming Vader.
Right.
So you never get to see what he's like as Vader.
Right.
You get to see him here, where he's right towards the end, and you get to see him there, right up to the beginning.
Right.
You don't get to see any of that conflict or any of the interplay with other generals and the power and the rage. And to their credit, the comics have done a good job of exploring a lot of this.
Oh, okay.
I've read some cool, volatile Vader stuff.
Great.
But why not play with that on screen?
I know.
When they've done so many of these Disney Plus movies and shows, like, why not play with that side of the character, explore that binary, that pendulum, that struggle in one of the most iconic, interesting characters in fiction?
And I think even like dark side stuff aside, they didn't establish Vader and Luke's relationship enough. They don't spend enough time together to earn their scene at the end. All you have is that they're related.
He calls him son 3 times, and then he dies.
And Luke calls him father. But like they don't spend any time together to establish any sort of complicated, difficult relationship. It's just he shows up because he knows he has to kill Vader.
Imagine a couple, right? Like imagine some training scenes where he had to teach him how to be better with the lightsaber duels.
Right.
So they're doing like a mock duel.
Right.
Like you could have explored that, and one of them gets really aggressive.
Yeah, and then it's like it can parallel beautifully with the Obi-Wan training and with the Yoda training, but it can be this dark version of it, but they don't do any of that.
Do dark side people fight dirty? Do they take cheap shots during a duel, and the Jedi are overly principled and rigid?
Like you could have played around with so much of that, and just there's none of it. It's so just dry. And like I think what was also so frustrating was I had heard about, like I knew about, like culturally, canonically, I knew about the temptation to go to the dark side. That's like the whole thing with this story. Before I'd seen these movies, like I knew that was the thing, and I knew that these movies played around with that, and that there's the Force and it can go good or it can go bad. And I was like, oh, this is like gonna be like the quintessential like temptation, like ultimate power, what are you going to do with it kind of story, similar to what's done with The Ring and Lord of the Rings and 1,000 other stories. And then it just didn't do anything with it, and I was like, that's it? That's what this whole franchise is based on? It just didn't make any sense to me.
I like that idea of thinking about it in terms of other fantasy trilogies, since this is space fantasy. Another sidebar, the beginning of the movie, we get these green pig guys with axes and tusks. They're just orcs. The guys at Jabba's palace. They're just orcs.
You know what they reminded me of is the guards in Maleficent's castle in Sleeping Beauty. That's what I thought of.
But comparing it to something like Return of the King.
Yeah.
I found a lot of resonance structurally between Return of the Jedi and The Hobbit, Battle of Five Armies.
Yeah.
Because that movie, you have the first act is leftovers from the previous film.
Yeah.
Where you have to deal with and kill Smaug. And then you get a long, winding battle dotted with character resolutions.
Right.
Here you get first act, leftovers with Jabba. It's all resolution from dangling threads from Empire. And then it's a long winding battle on Endor with occasional character beats and resolutions.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing, but I would say, as a defender of the Hobbit movies, that's an infinitely more satisfying movie.
I agree. That's a much more satisfying movie. I think the stakes are higher. They play around with... Well, no. Does Thorin's big, like, Shakespearean moment, that's in Desolation of Smaug, isn't it? But still,
but his death is great. The Azog thing is great. You have a stronger fellowship. You have better cuts between characters. The setting is cooler to look at.
Yeah.
It's, I would say...
The battle itself is more satisfying.
It's both more satisfying and less frustrating than this movie is.
Yeah, I mean, there are problems with that movie, but this one was much more difficult for me.
So that's sort of the meatball I think we have to get to is Endor.
Yeah.
Because that is, for some reason, 75% of this
like,
movie.
Why? What are they like? They
What
don't
did you
even.
think?
Well, okay. I will say when I watched this movie, I was a little sleepy from all the croissant making, but I was paying attention, right? And these like movies they're fairly accessible. Okay, they're not complicated. They got to Endor, and I was like, why are they there? Like, did they say why? I really don't know if they even said. They were just like vaguely like
a hologram where it was close to the new Death Star, and there was
But
vaguely.
it was so like weak. I was like, why are they on this planet? Okay, so number one, why are they there? Number two, the Ewoks. I can't. Okay, they're cute. The Ewoks are cute. I don't mind a cute creature. I can't even get into the racial connotations. Like, I can't even get into that.
Yeah, I didn't catch that when I was a kid.
I like don't even want to go there. We spend so much time there and nothing happens. Like, we occasionally have to fight the stormtroopers that aren't stormtroopers. What are those ones called where the helmets are different?
Yeah.
Whatever. Empire.
Some kind of scout
soldiers.
thing.
Like, we occasionally have to fight them on motorcycles. But, like, nothing happens.
Yeah.
They're just hanging out in the trees and just vibing with the Ewoks.
The vibing. So I tried to break down like what happens on Endor because I couldn't believe. I was staring at the screen. I couldn't believe we were still looking at. We had a whole galaxy, and I'm still looking at Endor. Like,
yes,
we have the speeder bikes and that chase, which is awesome.
That is really cool. I loved that.
Then you have the Ewoks introduction, which whatever. Then you have a house party. Then you have a battle. Then you have another house party.
Yes.
Like, I like the Ewoks in as much as they are cute teddy bears.
Yeah, right.
But they are almost instantly boring because they're not played for slapstick. They're not.
Right.
They could be like this fuzzy, goofy escalation of the droids who are all prim and proper and British.
Right.
They could have been funny. They could have been cartoonishly violent or clever and sneaky. They could have been like the straight man. Despite their appearance, you could have had the rebels being all goofy and the Ewoks being these like trained, merciless killers.
Yes.
You could have played them, developed some sort of interplay with the other characters. But the amount of time spent in this movie just standing around with Ewoks, watching them do gibberish.
Yeah, for no reason.
And then, again, completely grinding the movie to a halt for C-3PO to recap the entire saga, which we've already seen Obi-Wan do.
Yes.
It's wild.
It is so strange.
Imagine if Endor, if you cut it down, it was a 90-minute movie, and it was just the speeder bikes, and then a very trimmed down version of the battle that was funny.
Right.
And you cut it down into these discrete little segments, almost like parts of a mission. And you use those as vignettes with different subgroups of the characters where you have Han and Leia, Chewie, the droids. You can divide them up in interesting and funny ways. And you cut in between a main plot of Luke and Vader training and the Empire and the generals and really leaning into the bad guys. And you cut that with these fun, almost anecdotal side quests with the rebels on Endor. Because not to again miss the sort of forest for the trees, what the hell does the title mean?
It doesn't mean anything.
Because there's one Jedi and he's there the whole time. And he's never at risk of turning into anything else.
No, he doesn't return.
It's continuation of the Jedi.
It's just more of the Jedi. Yeah,
the title is just like Star Wars, another one, Return of Star Wars.
I guess it's like he returns back to Darth Vader. I don't know. It's a stretch for sure.
I know.
Yeah, I feel like what happened was they had so much footage of the Ewoks. They spent so much money and time getting these shots, and then they were in the editing room. They were like, we spent so much on this. We have to keep them in the movie. And so then just 80% of the movie is the Ewoks.
The ratio is so off. If you've got three major parts to this movie, you've got Jabba's palace, which has so many puppets, has so much downtime.
The puppets.
And Jabba he never feels like a real threat or villain.
Never.
So you've got the Jabba thing, the Endor thing, and the Vader Empire drama.
Yeah.
It's like 10% of the Vader stuff. 70% of Endor, and then you blow you were almost falling asleep during the Jabba stuff.
Oh my gosh,
beginning.
I was so uninterested in what was going on.
This movie is as bad as Empire was good, and because you're dealing with the actors playing these fantastic characters in their prime, I would say that of all of the Star Wars movies, this one's the worst because it is it's such a blown opportunity.
It's so disappointing.
You've got Harrison Ford in his prime, and you do nothing with him.
It's the third one in your main trilogy.
Right.
Like, you can really like ramp up, because the second movie, we talked a lot, is such a tonal shift from the first one.
Right.
It's a lot darker. It's digging a lot more. It's getting more complicated and more messy, and you're getting really invested. And they could have really taken that to the next level here, and instead they just kind of futzed around with Ewoks, and Luke killed Vader, and that was that.
Like, this is...
and they blew up the Death Star again.
Right, which is... it's such limp, stale repetition and stalling.
So sad.
Why... I mean, we judge trilogies by their finales. Mm-hmm. There's a reason that Return of the King is the one that swept the Oscars.
Yeah.
Even Battle of the Five Armies, I thought, was a wonderful curtain call for The Hobbit.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
It's really important to nail that third act.
Right.
Like, I was disappointed by Force Awakens, Last Jedi, whatever the hell, Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
But I wasn't expecting them to be great.
Right.
I was just sort of let down by them.
You're like, oh, those weren't very good.
I went in with like mediocre expectations to Solo and Mando and Rogue One. And those things all way overperformed my expectations.
Right. Uh-huh.
But this one, being part of the original trilogy, like every time there's a new Star Wars thing now, I have this like baseline hesitation.
Yeah.
This one I thought was a given.
Yeah, I know.
I'm so thrown by this one being bad.
I was like, I mean, I wasn't like, I can't wait to watch this third one, but like, you know, I really liked the second one, and I was like, this will probably be pretty good. I knew the Ewoks were in here, but I was like, I think they're cute. How bad can it be? And boy, it was bad.
It's pretty humbling, I think, to look back at how many decades this franchise has been going, to see what a nuclear bomb the first movie was to Hollywood and sort of mainstream accessible adventure storytelling.
Yeah.
And then to see how all of these creative teams have been chasing that for 50 years to try to equal it again. And I think this is, I think it's 40 years. This year is the 40th anniversary for Return of the Jedi.
It is, yeah. Crazy.
It's incredible that there's been one good sequel. Like, it almost, I'm going back and forth on this. Obviously, you can hear that, but it almost absolves every other Star Wars thing in my head. Like, it's really hard to make another chapter of this because they've done it right once.
Yeah. Do you know how this one was received, like, critically? And I assume it did well at the box office. But
well, it also had the benefit of, you know, it's the next one after Empire.
Yeah, right. You got built-in fan base.
Right.
But I don't know if, like, was there a resounding, like, yeah, a lot of people were disappointed in this one, or...
I don't think so.
Interesting.
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Alive in
I'm just thinking
1983.
about, okay, like, if this is how you ended your trilogy, how did you then, 20 years later, get the prequels?
But the frustrating thing is and the prequels are frustrating and disappointing in their own way, but they weren't dealing with these actors in their prime. They weren't getting to decide...
brand new stuff,
Right, like they're not deciding the end of the Vader arc.
Right, instead they're going back and retelling the story that was already kind of set up. So
And like there are stories from the books and the comics that would be great new Star Wars stories with these characters. And I'm a Solo defender. I really enjoyed that movie.
Yeah.
I was fine with the recasting. I thought it was respectful and innovative, and it sort of rode that line really well. I thought Aiden, can't pronounce his last name, Ellen Rick, something like that.
Don't ask me.
I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, he was
If
good.
you took something like the Thrawn trilogy, it's this. It was this series of novels. It's this big blue general guy who's this really strategic, intimidating bad dude that happens after Return of the Jedi. You could turn those books, or I read a great comic adaptation of those stories. It was, just a little trade paperback. You can get through it easy enough. If you turn those into movies, they'd have been great.
Right.
Like, I'm so frustrated now by where this franchise went because I was so reinvigorated by watching those first two again with you. Like, has this movie changed? For example, Mando starts on March 1st.
Yeah.
Has this movie changed how excited you are for the future of the franchise?
Well, what's interesting about Mando is season 1 was excellent. Season 2 was pretty good. But with this track record, I don't know if I'm going to trust the third installment of this great story. So I don't know.
Well, you already saw Boba Fett.
Man, Boba Fett was bad. I mean, there was the Mando episode in the middle, which was great.
That was awesome.
That was an incredible
And the Luke thing was cool.
The Luke
because
thing
that was him in the same outfit doing the same thing.
That was in Mando, right? Oh, wait, no. Luke is in...
He's teased at the end of Mando.
And he's also in that.
You saw him training Grogu.
That's right.
In that black outfit.
That's pretty cool.
Right.
You know why? Because it's referencing Empire Strikes Back. So yeah, I mean, I'm still gonna watch Mando because, I mean, I can't
Sure.
not watch Grogu because he's my son. But
you know what this makes me excited for?
what?
Watching Andor.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Which we're
for
about
Andor
to start.
because when we were watching Return of the Jedi, I think Cam was saying like. When it was a scene with Vader, Cam was like, "This is all I want. I just want." What did you say? You said, "I want black and white ships and fascism and rebellion," or something like that.
Just grayscale,
Grayscale.
scared British guys and freaky dudes in helmets and occasional lightning and lightsabers and death. That's all I want.
And that's what Andor is.
Industrial panic.
Yes.
That's what I want in Star Wars.
And so I've heard so many good things about Andor.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm really excited for that. As far as the other movies, I think what we've decided to do is we're going to watch the prequels because I'm in favor of watching in release order. So we watched 4, 5, and 6. Now we'll watch 1, 2, 3. I think we'll maybe do one episode on all 3 of them. I don't think we need to cover them one by one, especially because I've seen them. I don't remember them very well, but I have seen them, and I don't remember them being very good. And I don't want to just be angry for 3 episodes. So maybe we'll combine it into one. I don't know. What do y'all think?
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah.
Second Breakfast Pod on all of the social media.
And we're just not going to do 6, 7, and 8.
Sure.
Or sorry, 7, 8, 9. Like, I'm just not going to.
I wish we hadn't done 6. And you could also email us, secondbreakfastpod@gmail. But sort of a last question to wrap up. Where do you, because Disney owns this thing, it will never die.
Yeah.
Where do you think they go for the future of the franchise? Do you continue to milk the old characters and member berries of look, Lando's in this one, but it's about all these new characters you don't care, or do you move to a totally different area of the galaxy?
That's
or a totally
why
different time
Mando
period?
was so good, because it was a brand new character. I mean, there were familiar things like Tatooine and the idea and like, you know, it's Baby Yoda, you know, but it was different enough, and it was like not connected to the main story. Like there's still like the Empire exists and there's still like that stuff, but it was so separated from the main plot that it made it really great. I think the mistake with Boba Fett was trying to, well, there were a lot of mistakes, but one of them was trying to connect it. It was, you know, dipping into the bowl of member berries too much. And it just, it got old. And that was the problem with the new trilogy. So I think if you did something that was like, that almost feels like fan fiction, right? Like set in the world of Star Wars, but it's its own thing and it kind of doesn't matter for the rest of it. Like I'd be really happy with that.
Because I think the best Star Wars anything I've experienced in the last couple of years, because I think you're right that Mando, it doesn't really have the shine for me that it did in the first season.
Yeah.
The Star
because
Wars,
they try to connect too much to the larger thing.
Right. Or it just, I don't know. Like the trailer for the new season, I don't care about Mandalore.
Yeah.
I liked the one-off adventures.
I like him as his own dude.
Him and Grogu just kind of futzing around.
Yeah.
I don't need an overarching story. I kind of wish it was just
I like that it's
serialized.
isolated.
Yeah. And the more it gets connected, and I don't really care about the new characters. You can only have so many characters and helmets before I fall asleep. But the Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, the game, is incredible. The story's great. The characters are fantastic. It's within that original trilogy, because Vader's still alive. You still get that Empire threat, but it feels scary. And it's so varied in its locations. It was an incredible game experience. And the sequel's coming out in a few months. I'm super pumped for that.
Cool.
But you could do a Last of Us thing and just turn that into a movie.
Yeah.
Like, you'd lose a little bit. Obviously, you could do like a miniseries to capture more of the whole story.
Sure.
But even as a movie, those would be great.
Yeah.
And that's working within the lines, within the timeline, but with almost all new characters.
Yeah, right. The thing is, I don't think they'll ever do that.
I know.
which is the saddest part.
We're at a weird spot where it feels like they're spinning their wheels.
Because they're like, what do we do now?
If you look at Disney as a company that in the past decade or so has mostly acquired things. They've made a lot of stuff, but not a lot of it does terribly well.
No.
It's really them acquiring Star Wars and Marvel.
Or like remaking old things from the glory days.
Right.
In live action versions.
But those don't create like a cultural event, really.
No.
When they made those deals, I remember, the last time I went to Disney World was around the time they were going to buy Star Wars. And I was so excited because the sort of common sense wisdom at the time was that Star Wars was the much smarter purchase.
Yeah.
And that it would pay off much bigger for
Compared
them.
to like Marvel, you mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think they happened to do a very good, clean job of building the MCU, where you develop these characters simply in these standalone movies. They get sequels. I'm talking about the original Avengers cast, the Iron Man, Captain America. You develop
Hulk,
those, you get a team up, you do a couple phases of that, and then it ends with Thanos. Everything after that is just afterburn. It's just wisps. There's nothing. I saw Endgame in theaters. I enjoyed the resolution of it. I don't enjoy those movies much.
Yeah.
Like, I still see them occasionally if they've got a good premise or whatever, the character I happen to like. But I was so, like, satisfied and done. As much as I don't really care about it, when I saw the end of Endgame, I was like, okay, that was fun.
Yeah.
Never again.
Right. And then they kept going.
And I haven't even thought about seeing one since.
No, I haven't.
Not one.
I don't the last Marvel movie I saw was maybe, I'm not counting Black Panther because that was like its own thing. Black Panther was great. The first one. I didn't see the second one. But it wasn't Endgame. It was like the one before that. Like
Captain Marvel?
I was in undergrad. Like, it was a long time ago. No, I didn't see Captain Marvel.
I think that was the one before that.
No, I meant the Avengers movie before Endgame.
Oh, Infinity
Ultron.
War. Age of Ultron?
I think it was Age of Ultron.
With the guy from The Office, James Spader.
The one with the purple man. I don't know. I saw there was a purple man.
But yeah, my point was...
It's been a long time.
My point was Disney did a really good job building the Marvel thing.
Yeah.
But it feels like they've consistently fumbled the Star Wars thing. Yeah. Whether it's constantly firing directors, creative people leaving all the time, and then you get this kind of Frankenstein skeleton movie.
Yes. And then they make a documentary series about how beautiful and amazing and utopia the production was.
Right.
It's so cringy.
Which is like this horrific imitation of the appendices for the Lord of the Rings box set.
It's so painful to watch.
Because like even Rogue One and Solo, which are the only movies I've liked that they've done, they fired the directors and reshot whole things. And it is that like sort of Frankenstein, almost authorless text. So it's just sort of luck that those came out the right way because people had the right Band-Aids to turn it into a movie. But it's crazy that almost 10 or 15 years or whatever we are on from that purchase date, how these franchises have played out.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've burned it too much.
I feel like they have. I think they're just running out.
The franchise is almost like people just have like a bored, bad... Like it went from people hating it to being apathetic about it.
Yes.
Like they were frustrated. Oh, you didn't do the Luke thing right. Last Jedi was, all of that. It went from that to just... Oh, there's an Obi-Wan show. Oh. Andor.
Did anybody watch Obi-Wan?
More people than watched Andor.
Weird.
Unfortunately.
Weird. Probably because it's like, I know that character.
Yeah. I wonder what they do. Do you put it on ice for a few years? Do you just keep taking stabs at different times?
I think they're just gonna beat that horse until it's fully dead.
Because there was a rumor a couple weeks ago that they might make more movies with Rey.
Just no.
You know what's weird? Looking back on that...
I mean, there's nothing wrong with Rey. She's fine.
Looking back on that Disney trilogy...
Yeah.
The Force Awakens did have, like... I don't know. There was something promising about that movie.
That was the first one, right?
Yeah.
I liked that. I liked that one. I mean, there was a lot of, like, remember the first movie?
It was very familiar.
But, like, I liked the story. I liked the idea of, like, Finn as the turned stormtrooper.
Exactly.
Like, Rey's parentage, like BB-8 was great. Like, I was like,
There's a lot of promise.
I could get into Star Wars now. And then...
I think the biggest, if you look at this as sort of a trilogy flaming out, I'm so disappointed that they'd never played with Finn. Because I think John Boyega is by far the best part of that trilogy. Yeah. As much as, I mean, I love Adam Driver. That's a villain. He's a different thing. But of the heroes, John Boyega's Finn was fantastic.
He was so good.
He genuinely had the level of charisma and charm where he could have been the Han Solo of that franchise.
He was the Han of that franchise.
And I feel like they froze him in carbonite and wasted him from the beginning of Last Jedi through that trilogy.
He just did nothing. It was so sad. and as great as Adam Driver is, that character's not written well. And
they could have done everything I suggested for Luke and Vader. They could have done that with him and Rey, and they did it a little more, but
kind of did it, but it didn't work.
And why did they bring back the Emperor?
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Oscar Isaac just weeping in the background of it,
just crying through that line. Man, yeah,
he was great too, and they wasted him.
Yes, they did.
But I liked Daisy Ridley.
She was great.
I thought that character was fun.
I think that's really the takeaway of Star Wars is just wasted potential.
That's a great way to end
this universe is so interesting and can be so fantastic. And so many times they just flop it. And it's so devastating to watch.
Yes. This is our abrupt end of Star Wars coverage. We might do more, we might not, but we also just kind of talked about the whole thing.
So. I think we'll go ahead and watch the prequels, and if they're worth talking about, we'll talk about them.
If we have enough to say, we'll do like a roundup.
Yeah, right. But if you have thoughts on that, I mean, if you're like a diehard Star Wars fan, and I would love to hear your thoughts.
Up and up and up and straight off the cliff.
Ugh, disappointing. Just BB-8 rolling off the side of the cliff. Man, I do like BB-8 though. He's so cute.
If you want something totally different, on Tuesday this week, we just covered Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey.
Oh my God.
Which is Winnie the Pooh entering the public domain and then making a ludicrous, hysterical, ridiculous, silly, great slasher.
Man, it was so much fun.
Piglet is a half man, half boar with a sledgehammer chasing girls in bikinis.
Pooh is wearing a red flannel and he's killing people. Man, it's so good.
It is so much good. That episode's 20 minutes of us laughing.
Yep.
It's so much fun. Go check that out. And next Friday, we'll be back with the next chapter of The Witcher, Tower of Swallows.
Yep. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. Have a good one.
Bye.